Yeah, well, don't you think it's kind of a waste for the two of us
To wander separately?
Uh-huh.
But only one is a wanderer. Two together are always going somewhere.
Vertigo wasn't just a Hitchcock thriller. It was a catastrophic box office failure that became one of cinema's greatest masterpieces. Behind those hypnotic spirals and haunting shots of San Francisco, chaos erupted on set. Kim Novak fought brutal studio control, James Stewart battled inner demons, and Hitchcock's obsessions nearly derailed the entire production. The film that tops critics' lists today was once considered Hitchcock's most embarrassing failure. Today, I'm revealing 20 weird facts about Vertigo that will make you question everything you thought you knew about this psychological masterpiece. And stick around for our bonus fact, the shocking revelation about the film's ending that Hitchcock took to his grave. So settle in and prepare to see Vertigo through entirely new eyes. 1. Vertigo was an embarrassing box office disaster. Vertigo didn't triumph at its premiere. It bombed. Critics dismissed it as slow, confusing, and self-indulgent. Audiences walked out of theaters bewildered by the film's psychological complexity and unconventional structure. Paramount executives were furious with Hitchcock for delivering what they considered an unmarketable, overly artistic failure that lost the studio nearly $400,000, equivalent to about $4 million today. Hitchcock was devastated. He had poured his deepest obsessions into the film, only to watch it be ridiculed. "I don't think I've ever quite recovered from the reception," he later confessed to Francois Truffaut. The failure stung so badly that Hitchcock bought back the rights to Vertigo along with 4 other films, then shelved it for years, keeping it out of circulation until 1983. 2. The iconic Vertigo effect was an accidental discovery. The dizzying camera technique that defines the film, where the background appears to stretch away while the foreground remains stable, wasn't meticulously planned by Hitchcock. It was a happy accident. Second unit cameraman Erman Roberts was experimenting on set one day, trying to visually capture the sensation of Vertigo. He didn't have a sophisticated plan. He simply combined a camera zoom with a dolly pullback simultaneously. When Hitchcock saw the dailies, he was electrified. "That's it! That's the sensation!" he reportedly exclaimed. The effect was insanely expensive to execute. Each Vertigo shot cost nearly $19,000 in today's money and required rebuilding portions of the staircase to accommodate the massive camera rig. Studio executives balked at the expense for something that appears on screen for mere seconds. Hitchcock didn't care. He knew it would become the visual signature of Vertigo itself. 3. Vera Miles was supposed to be the star, not Kim Novak. The blonde at the center of Scotty's obsession wasn't supposed to be Kim Novak. Hitchcock had meticulously groomed contract player Vera Miles for stardom, investing years in crafting her image and training her in his techniques. Vertigo was meant to be her breakthrough, transforming her into the next Grace Kelly. Then disaster struck. Miles became pregnant just before filming was scheduled to begin. Hitchcock didn't hide his fury. "She became pregnant," he later sneered in interviews. "She had no right to do that." The director's cold reaction revealed his controlling nature. He viewed his actresses as artistic property, not individuals with lives of their own. Miles' pregnancy forced a rushed recasting that brought in Kim Novak, fundamentally altering the film's dynamic. The irony? Novak's resistance to Hitchcock's control mirrored her character's rebellion against Scotty's obsessive makeover. 4. Kim Novak waged a desperate war against the studio's control. When Paramount and Hitchcock dictated that Novak must wear a rigid gray suit and dye her hair platinum blonde, the actress fought back with everything she had. "I couldn't be another woman," Novak recalled. "I couldn't be dressed up and made over. It wasn't just a role. It was exactly what they were doing to me in real life." The studio's control became suffocating. Novak was on a brutal 7-year contract that dictated her weight, wardrobe, dating life, and public appearances. When she pushed back against Vertigo's blonde transformation scenes, executives threatened to sue her for millions. In a desperate move, Novak locked herself in her dressing room and refused to emerge. The standoff lasted days. Production halted completely. Finally, Hitchcock himself visited her, not with threats, but with a willingness to negotiate. A compromise? The iconic gray suit would remain, but she could keep elements of her natural hair color for certain scenes. 5. James Stewart was 25 years older than his leading lady. The age gap between Stewart and Novak wasn't just noticeable, it was deliberately uncomfortable. Stewart was 49 when filming began. Novak was just 24. This wasn't accidental casting. It was Hitchcock's calculated decision to heighten the unsettling power dynamics at play. What audiences didn't know was that Stewart was deeply uncomfortable with the age difference. In daily letters to his wife Gloria, he expressed concern about how predatory his character appeared. "This isn't the Jimmy Stewart people know," he wrote. "I worry what this will do to the image they have of me." Hitchcock leveraged this discomfort. He pushed Stewart to lean into the character's disturbing obsession, telling him, "I need the James Stewart who was in Winchester 73, not the one from Harvey." The result was one of Stewart's most complex performances. A man whose romantic fixation crosses into psychological manipulation, all amplified by the visible age difference that makes modern viewers squirm. 6. The film's vibrant colors were a technical revolution. Vertigo's hypnotic color palette wasn't just artistic choice, it was technological breakthrough. Hitchcock employed the revolutionary VistaVision format with an experimental Technicolor process that allowed for unprecedented color saturation, particularly in the film's iconic reds and greens. Each color in Vertigo was meticulously planned. The emerald green that envelops Madeleine in the restaurant scene required special lighting setups that overheated the set to dangerous levels. Actors could only work in 20-minute intervals before requiring breaks to prevent heat exhaustion. The signature red walls of Ernie's restaurant weren't painted. They were special reflective panels that intensified the color on film. Technicolor executives were so concerned about the film's extreme use of color that they sent warning memos to Hitchcock. These color values have never been tested on audiences and may trigger adverse physical reactions. Hitchcock ignored them. The result was a color palette so psychologically potent that filmmakers still study it today. 7. Bernard Herrmann's score was nearly rejected by the studio. The haunting, swirling music that's inseparable from Vertigo today was almost thrown out entirely. When Paramount executives first heard Herrmann's completed score, they were horrified. "Where's the jazz? Where's the romance?" one reportedly demanded. "This sounds like a horror film. Americans won't understand this European nonsense." Herrmann, known for his volatile temper, erupted. He refused to change a single note, declaring, "What Hitchcock has done visually, I have done orally. If you remove my score, you remove the film's pulse." The standoff continued for weeks, delaying the film's release. Hitchcock ultimately sided with his composer, threatening to remove his name from the film if the score was altered. The music stayed and became one of cinema's most influential scores, with its spiraling, obsessive string arrangements pioneering a new language for psychological thrillers that reverberates in film music to this day. 8. The film contains a hidden confession about Hitchcock himself. Vertigo isn't just a thriller, it's Hitchcock's most personal confession. The director was notoriously obsessed with controlling blonde actresses, dressing them, and molding them to his precise specifications. In Scotty's manipulation of Judy, forcing her to become Madeleine, Hitchcock essentially exposed his own psychological patterns. "When I watch that makeover sequence now," said Novak years later, "I realize Alfred was showing himself, his own obsession with creating perfect women and then being disappointed when they turned out to be human." What viewers didn't realize was that while filming these scenes, Hitchcock was simultaneously waging a campaign to control aspects of Novak's personal life, including her romance with Sammy Davis Jr. a relationship the studio considered scandalous. The director became increasingly frustrated as Novak resisted his control, mirroring the very dynamic playing out between Scotty and Judy on screen. 9. San Francisco locations were altered in reality to fit Hitchcock's vision. Hitchcock didn't just film San Francisco, he reimagined it. When actual locations didn't match his psychological vision, he simply changed them. The iconic winding staircase in the Mission Tower? It didn't exist. The real Mission San Juan Bautista had no tower at all. Hitchcock had the entire structure created through matte paintings. Even more disturbing was his approach to Madeleine's apartment building. After selecting the Empire Hotel, now the Hotel Vertigo, Hitchcock had the entire exterior repainted a specific shade of green that complemented Novak's costumes. The building's owners were baffled, but Hitchcock's contract gave him complete control over any location used in the film. Local officials were outraged when Hitchcock insisted on recoloring sections of the Golden Gate Bridge to enhance its ominous quality. He backed down only when threatened with legal action. The San Francisco Chronicle ran a headline, "Director claims city doesn't know its own color." 10. The film's male gaze created academic film theory. Vertigo didn't just entertain audiences, it transformed how we analyze cinema. The film's obsessive perspective became the centerpiece of Laura Mulvey's groundbreaking 1975 essay, Visual Pleasure and Narrative Cinema, which introduced the concept of the male gaze, now a fundamental framework in film criticism. What's shocking is that Hitchcock was consciously exploring these dynamics decades before they had academic terminology. The film's legacy as feminist critique is deeply ironic considering how problematically Hitchcock treated his actresses. Yet Vertigo's self-awareness about masculine control made it the perfect case study for examining how cinema itself can reinforce patterns of objectification and control. Hey, go ahead and like and subscribe because we're about to reveal the bizarre connection between Vertigo and a real-life murder case that haunted Hitchcock until his death. 11. The film was based on a French novel with Nazi connections. What audiences didn't know was that Vertigo was adapted from D'entre les Morts, From Among the Dead, a 1954 French novel written by Boileau-Narcejac. The darker truth? The authors wrote it specifically to attract Hitchcock, who had narrowly missed acquiring the rights to their previous novel, which became the French thriller Diabolique. The novel's origins were even more disturbing. The authors were inspired by the true story of a Nazi officer who became obsessed with a woman who resembled his dead lover, ultimately forcing her to dress and behave like the deceased. Screenwriter Samuel Taylor deliberately obscured this connection, fearing American audiences would reject a film with any Nazi associations so soon after World War II. When French critics pointed out these origins, Hitchcock neither confirmed nor denied them, saying only, "The psychological pattern is universal. Obsession transcends specific historical contexts." 12. James Stewart performed his own dangerous stunts. Despite his fear of heights, 49-year-old Stewart insisted on performing his own rooftop stunts without a double. The opening chase sequence, where Scotty clings to a gutter high above San Francisco, wasn't shot on a soundstage. It was filmed on an actual building with Stewart suspended 5 stories above the ground. Jimmy was shaking so badly we could see it through the camera, assistant director Herbert Coleman recalled. But he refused to let us bring in the double. He said Scotty's fear had to be real. The production insurance company nearly shut down filming when they discovered Stewart was performing these scenes himself. Stewart later confessed that the experience triggered actual vertigo episodes that plagued him for months after filming concluded. 13. Kim Novak suffered a psychological breakdown during filming. The psychological toll of playing dual roles and being controlled by both her character's lover and her real-life director pushed Novak to the breaking point. Midway through production, she disappeared from set for 3 days. When found, she was in a dissociative state, struggling to distinguish between herself and her characters. "I became lost between Judy and Madeleine and Kim," she later revealed. Hitchcock kept us filming out of sequence deliberately. Monday, I was Judy, Tuesday, Madeleine, Wednesday, back to Judy. I started having dreams where I was falling from the tower, but I didn't know which woman I was as I fell. Production was quietly halted while Novak received psychiatric treatment. Paramount covered up the breakdown, attributing the delay to technical difficulties. When filming resumed, Hitchcock modified his approach, allowing Novak more agency in developing the character's psychological transitions, a rare concession from the controlling director. 14. The costume that drives the plot caused physical injuries. The rigid gray suit that becomes the visual symbol of Scotty's obsession wasn't just emotionally constraining. It physically injured Novak. Designed to be uncomfortably tight, the suit was constructed with internal boning similar to a corset, restricting Novak's movement and breathing. I couldn't sit down properly, Novak recalled. Between takes, they had to bring in a special leaning board so I could rest without wrinkling the suit. After long days of shooting in the constricting garment, Novak developed bruising along her ribcage that required medical attention. The physical restriction became integral to her performance. Designer Edith Head later expressed regret about the design's severity, but Hitchcock was unapologetic. Her physical discomfort translates perfectly to Madeleine's psychological imprisonment. 15. The famous nightmare sequence used techniques from German Expressionism. The surreal nightmare sequence, with its disembodied heads and pulsing colors, wasn't created with then-new animation technology, as many assume. Instead, Hitchcock insisted on using obsolete in-camera techniques borrowed from German Expressionist films of the 1920s. Special effects artist John Fulton used rotating mirrors, hand-painted backgrounds, and physical distortion of the film negative to create the sequence. The process was so labor-intensive that this 30-second sequence took longer to create than a week of regular shooting. The resulting sequence was so psychologically disturbing that several test screening audience members reported actual nightmares after viewing the film. 16. The film contains hidden double exposures throughout Hitchcock, secretly embedded subliminal imagery throughout Vertigo that most viewers never consciously notice. In scenes featuring Madeleine, split-second double exposures briefly superimpose Carlotta's face over hers, appearing and vanishing so quickly that viewers perceive only a momentary unease without knowing why. These technical manipulations weren't mentioned to the studio, who would have rejected them as needlessly complex. Hitchcock's camera operator Len South recalled, "Alfred would wait until executives left the set, then whisper instructions for these ghost exposures. They were shot after hours and spliced in during private editing sessions." Film preservationists discovered the full extent of these subliminal images only during the 1996 restoration. When questioned about these techniques late in his life, Hitchcock smiled and said, "Cinema works on the subconscious. Why shouldn't my camera do the same?" 17. Hitchcock personally designed the spiraling title sequence. The hypnotic spiral opening sequence wasn't created by the title designer credited on screen. Hitchcock himself obsessively designed every aspect of the opening, collaborating directly with artist John Whitney. The director became so fixated on perfecting the spiral patterns that he delayed production for 2 weeks. Whitney used mechanical analog computers originally developed for World War II anti-aircraft targeting systems to create the precise mathematical spirals. Hitchcock would visit my workshop at 2 a.m. with new sketches, Whitney recalled. He understood the mathematics of these patterns better than I did. The spirals weren't just artistic choice, they were calculated to induce mild disorientation in viewers. Hitchcock deliberately calibrated the pattern speeds to impact human equilibrium, essentially inducing a mild vertigo sensation in the audience before the first scene even began. Several theaters reported complaints of dizziness during early screenings. 18. Hitchcock filmed a completely different ending that was destroyed. Vertigo's original ending was dramatically different from what audiences saw. Hitchcock initially filmed a finale showing Scotty and Midge listening to a radio report revealing Elster's arrest in Europe. The scene provided closure and suggested Scotty might recover with Midge's help. Test audiences responded positively to this more hopeful conclusion. Studio executives strongly preferred it, but Hitchcock was dissatisfied, finding it artificially reassuring. In a rare move that shocked Paramount, he ordered the negatives of the scene destroyed, not just removed, but physically destroyed, ensuring his preferred ambiguous ending couldn't be overridden by the studio. "I didn't want to give the audience an emotional exit route," Hitchcock later explained. "The point is that obsession destroys. To suggest recovery would be a lie." This decision contributed to the film's initial commercial failure, but preserved the psychological impact that later generations would recognize as essential to its greatness. 19. The film was unavailable to the public for nearly 2 decades. After Vertigo's disappointing reception, Hitchcock did something unprecedented. He bought back the rights to the film, along with 4 others, including Rear Window, and essentially removed them from circulation. From 1968 to 1983, Vertigo disappeared almost entirely from public view. This wasn't just a director protecting his work. It was strategic cultural manipulation. Hitchcock, understanding how absence creates mystique, deliberately created scarcity. During these lost years, Vertigo's reputation grew through academic writing, making it the most analyzed film that audiences couldn't actually see. When Universal finally acquired the rights after Hitchcock's death and re-released the film in 1984, audiences experienced it as a revelation rather than a revival. This artificial scarcity helped transform Vertigo from commercial failure to cultural touchstone, exactly as Hitchcock had calculated decades earlier. 20. Vertigo dethroned Citizen Kane as greatest film ever made. For 50 years, Orson Welles' Citizen Kane held the undisputed title of greatest film ever made in the prestigious Sight and Sound Critics poll conducted every decade. In 2012, the unthinkable happened. Vertigo dethroned Kane, claiming the top position. The reversal wasn't just surprising, it represented a fundamental shift in how cinema itself is evaluated. Kane was praised for technical innovation and narrative structure. Vertigo's ascension signaled a new appreciation for psychological complexity and emotional impact over formal elements. What's extraordinary is how thoroughly the critical consensus reversed. The same film that Variety initially dismissed as too slow and too long was now celebrated precisely for its deliberate pacing and hypnotic atmosphere. Hitchcock didn't live to see this vindication, but his infamous control extended beyond the grave. He had perfectly calculated how Vertigo would eventually be received, just decades later than he'd hoped. Bonus fact: the most closely guarded secret about Vertigo wasn't on screen. It was Hitchcock's deliberate sabotage of his own film's marketing. While most directors fight to protect their twist endings, Hitchcock did the opposite. He personally created a trailer that explicitly revealed the Judy Madeleine twist that comes 2/3 through the film. This wasn't a mistake. It was calculated subversion. "The surprise is not who she is," Hitchcock told composer Bernard Herrmann. "The surprise is that I tell you who she is halfway through." By revealing the mystery, Hitchcock transformed Vertigo from conventional thriller into psychological character study. Studio executives were furious, believing he had ruined the film's commercial prospects. Hitchcock was unmoved. "I'm not interested in who did it, but in why did they do it." This decision prioritized artistic integrity over commercial success, contributing to the film's initial failure but establishing the psychological depth that would eventually make it recognized as his masterpiece. Vertigo wasn't just a film that failed before it succeeded. It was Hitchcock's most personal creation, a mirror reflecting his own obsessions, control issues, and artistic vision. The film that critics initially dismissed has now influenced generations of filmmakers, from David Lynch to Christopher Nolan, who recognized what initial audiences couldn't see. Beneath the thriller framework lay cinema's most profound exploration of obsession, identity, and the destructive power of trying to reshape another human being. If you enjoyed these revelations about Vertigo, hit subscribe for more deep dives into cinema's greatest mysteries. And let me know in the comments, which of Hitchcock's films should we explore next?